Good evening, guys. How we doing? Wednesday night Q&A. So, what I said I'd do this evening, if you caught any of the workouts last couple of days, is talk through some of the terms that are commonly used around training. And the reason this has kind of come up is I realise that I will say things either within a workout or send you a workout, a program or whatever, and there'll be things in there that are, to me, I've been using them for years, ways to describe sets, ways to describe how we do things in workouts, but actually it's fitness jargon, and sometimes also there's kind of abbreviations and acronyms attached to things that therefore don't always make sense if someone like me just says it out. And the thing is, when I use something all the time, quite commonly, then don't kind of appreciate that obviously not everyone is as up on just what the terminology is. And actually there's probably nothing that I'm going to talk about this evening that if you do it anyway, you use these things, you use these different workouts, sets, and you use these different methods of training, just you might not have realised that it's actually got a name for it. And so I've had a couple of questions in when I've been doing programs, and I might talk about it through a video where I actually send to someone for their workout, and even then, it still might not be 100% clear, and I get that. When I was teaching and as a coach as well as a trainer, you try and kind of explain things in at least a couple of different ways to make sure there's a good understanding. And part of that usually is kind of copying, visual learners, seeing it happen. Some people can learn really well from talking like this, as in auditory learners, and some people have to experience it, kinesthetic learners, and there's all sorts of degrees in between. So when I was a teacher as well, we used to kind of try and account for those styles of learning. And through this video, particularly tonight, I'm just going to sit and talk through them. But I think what I'll do as well is do another video just explaining the different things and give some examples. And I'll try and talk through some examples right now, but obviously I appreciate this actually might not be the best way to pick it up from these different terms tonight. And I'm going to add a couple of little bits of other kind of training methodology and little bits of research and things like that I've got written down. So often I come on with a kind of overarching thing to talk about. Today I've actually detailed down some of the things that I'm going to talk about, just to make sure I kind of cover the main ones. And then if there's any other terms that you hear around training that you want me to cover, either just quickly for you, or I can come back and do this kind of thing again with some more different terms and things like that. But I've kind of gone for the main ones that I would use during a personal training session, coaching, doing a video to send to you, or during workouts in general. So the first thing I wanted to cover was exercise types. Now, most exercises when it comes to movement, either with body weight, with equipment, machines, whatever it is, generally fall into two main categories. The first one are compound exercises. Now, the definition really is exercises that move muscles across more than one joint. So, for instance, a squat is a compound movement because you move from your hips, your knees and your ankles, so we're covering three joints. A chest press or a press up, you're moving across, in a sense, three sets of joints again: wrist, elbow, shoulder. Something like a row is the same. It's a compound movement going the opposite way, although a wrist probably don't move very much in that. So they're all examples of compound moves. Anything that moves across more than one joint. And actually that kind of covers our six main movement patterns: are push and pull horizontally, chest press and row, pressing up and pulling down, or pulling yourself up. So shoulder press type movements, pull up type movements, lat pull down in the gym, when you pull the bar towards you. Those are your upper body, 4 different directions, and then varying degrees, angles in between. And then the lower body, the squat movement pattern and the hip hinge movement pattern, which is hip hinges as in the hips moving backwards, so like a deadlift, some lunges, and things like glute bridges and hip thrusts. They're all hip hinge movements, and they're all compounds because they're moving across more than one joint. So the second term that goes with that is isolated exercises. Now they're exercises that are going to move across one joint only. So things like lateral raises just in the shoulders, things like chest flies just across the shoulder again, but at that chest angle. Things like the leg extension machine, as in just lifting up the knee, or the hamstring curl machine, all examples of single joint isolated exercises. So those are two kind of movements. And then on top of that, we can add static holds or isometric holds. That is when we put the muscles under tension and then hold it still. So things like a wall sit, a plank is always a good example of a isometric hold. We're getting the core still and stable but under tension and working. So those are kind of the three main movement, or in the case of static isometric holds, non-movement ways of stimulating and training the muscles. And just on that, obviously training is a stimulus. We're aiming to create a challenge to whatever muscles as we're working and using, and from there, by creating that challenge, we're causing the body to adapt and get better, ready for getting that stimulus again. And that's why over time we need to add a bit more stimulus, because the body gets better at what we've already asked it to do. Cool, so moving on in terms of those exercises. Now what might happen with those exercises is we might do them in different types of sets. So there are straight sets. And what I mean by straight sets is you would take one exercise, you would do that exercise for the number of repetitions that you're going to do, rest, and go straight back to do that same exercise again. And often we do that with compounds. We can also do it with isolations. You know, it's different. Usually sometimes it comes down to practicalities and what you are aiming to achieve. If you are aiming to get strong at squats, then you would concentrate on squats maybe 2-3 times a week, and you would probably do them in straight sets because you are aiming to get stronger in that movement. Also on top of that, squats being a fairly complex movement, you don't want to do too much around it that's going to fatigue you too much. I'm talking about barbell squats, you know, working up to a good challenging weight. You're not going to do too much around that that's going to compromise your energy and available kind of so mainly your energy and your available kind of nutrients in your body to be able to do that movement and keep really good form, because it's a complex movement. You know, where the barbell sits on your back, or if you're doing front squats, the same. You know, you don't want to be compromising your ability to do that by doing loads of exercises around it. Bodyweight squats or squats with dumbbells, you know, a bit lighter, as we're doing some of the workouts I use for MW Fitness Online. You know, it's a great movement pattern that we use all the time to stand up and sit down, all those sorts of things. You know, we're going to then potentially just use it within a group of exercises. That's cool. When we're talking about working up to a heavy weight, we're going to keep that probably into straight sets. Same with a deadlift. In a sense, for me, even more so with something like a deadlift, working up to heavy deadlifts, you just want to concentrate on the deadlifts at the time. So you kind of got to pick the exercises that, in a sense, require a little bit of respect, and the fact that, you know, if you don't do them well, then the injury risk is that little bit, potential is a little bit higher. So therefore, you might just do them in straight sets. Also, you know, for some people, competitively, they're looking to get stronger at those sorts of movements, or even for sports. So they just concentrate on doing that movement really well for that part of the workout and then move on. So then the next type of sets that I use quite a lot with my own training and with people that I train are called supersets. Now, a superset is where you take 2 exercises and do them back to back, with only the rest in between the exercises is to transition from the one movement to another. So that might mean going from one place to somewhere else, or literally putting one set of equipment down to pick up another set. So for instance, you could be doing a chest press with dumbbells or a bar or whatever you're doing it with, and then you might do the opposite movement, the row, straight afterwards. So you're working press, then pull, and that might mean that you do your presses, then you have to stand up to do the rows, or you move to another piece of equipment, or you use dumbbells and then you're using a band or a cable machine, depending on where you're doing these exercises to do that. Another type of superset is doing two complementary exercises into the same muscle group. So two ways of doing this: either kind of do the compound first and then the isolation after, or do the isolation first and the compound second. And when we do the isolation first, it's usually called pre-exhaust. So what you're aiming to do is do some work into that muscle group with a fairly simple movement to create more stimulus when you then go to the compound movement. In a sense, there's no right or wrong. It's just picking the right application, the right time, and the right set of exercises for working that muscle for what you're trying to achieve. And some of it sometimes comes down to personal preference. If you enjoy training a certain muscle group, you might start to stack these exercises up. So for instance, if we're talking about doing an isolation for the chest, it might be doing a fly movement first and then into a press, or flip it around the other way. It might be a case of doing a chest press type movement first and then go into a fly. I'm using this quite a lot at the moment with people that have got bands to use. Using the bands, lying on the floor or lying on the bench, just pressing with the bands. That's a harder movement than then going to the fly. But if you do the compound first, the chest press first, then to the fly, you're going to continue with the stimulus onto that muscle, and therefore you're doing more work in the workout, burns more calories, if fat loss or weight loss is your aim, or you're just creating more stimulus for more potential to change those muscles. So that's supersets. Then we go up again, we add trisets, means 3 exercises. Now these are quite commonly used for me for shoulders. Shoulders are one of my favourite muscle groups to train, but they don't need that heavier weight because it's a group of much more complex group of muscles than kind of the bigger chest muscles or the bigger back muscles, the bigger leg muscles. It's a group of muscles working together. So actually, tricep, beauty of that is you're working then you can work at different angles, different positions through the same muscle group to create more stimulus with a lighter weight. Also, that's really good right now if you're working out at home and you've only got access to limited equipment. This is where trisets come into their own, in that, for instance, you might do lateral raises because your dumbbells are quite light, then you might do reverse flies, working through the back of the shoulders, the rear delts, then you might go to shoulder presses. But because you've done the other 2 movements first, that shoulder press with the weight you've got might be quite easy if you just did it as straight sets, but you've already created stimulus and started to work those muscles in that area. So that's where a tricep comes in. And the last one of these is a giant set, which is actually going to be 4 or more exercises into a muscle group. Now these are quite useful in terms of body weight training particularly, or working once again with quite low levels of resistance because you haven't got much equipment at home. So for instance, a giant set might look like some of the sets we do in the morning with the bodyweight workouts. So maybe for a lower body, you might do reverse lunges, forward lunges, wide squats and close squats. But because you're then doing 4 exercises into the same area, you've actually created a really good stimulus. So it's just using the right tools in the right places. And I wouldn't recommend doing a giant set for legs that included heavy squats, or appreciate that you're going to need a long rest after you've done all the exercises. You might do your squats first, then you could, off the top of my head, you could then go and do leg extensions, walking lunges and hamstring curls, for instance, and that's creating obviously a really good stimulus on the legs, but you're going to compromise how well you can do the squats unless you rest for quite a significant amount of time, and sometimes time is not something we've got lots of, and we do want to work out efficiently. It's just picking the right kind of exercises and muscle groups to do these different styles of sets. So either straight sets, supersets, trisets, giant sets, they've all got really good applications. It's just picking the right time to do it. Just before we move on to the next kind of term, I've just been looking at some research recently, and I always kind of, in my mind, always try and put compound exercises due to their complexity and being able to be focused and put a good amount of the energy you've got into doing them really well, more towards the start of a workout. In my mind, also because they are more beneficial in terms of you're working more muscle, therefore more stimulus and things like that. But what they've started to find out with a bit of research at the moment is actually the exercises that create the biggest stimulus in a resistance workout, this is working with weights, that's where the research has been done, are the ones you do at the start. So actually, if you did isolated exercises right at the start, in terms of working to a high intensity and taking them to failure, they're the ones that are going to create the most stimulus. And actually, once you go past a certain point, whatever exercise you're picking, you are getting a kind of a diminishing return. And I talked about this before, where actually the research done by like similar group of scientists, to be fair, they're fairly consistent on kind of researching these parameters between, I mean, we're talking about a worldwide group, but this kind of same research, PhD, doctors and above, kind of pop up all the time as collaborators on these things. Once you go past 9 to 12 intense sets on a body part per week, so it doesn't have to be in the same workout per week with adequate recovery, you're not really going to get much more benefit from doing even more sets. So for instance, you know, if you do 3 variations of a chest press in a workout on a Monday, and you do 3 good sets. So for instance, you might do flat, incline and decline, or you might do flat, incline and flies, and you do 3 to 4 sets on your chest workout. You've done, that's it, that's enough. The only reason, in a sense, to return to it is because of the workout pattern that you use, or because you enjoy it and you want to go back and train those muscles again. I personally would say you need to balance it out, and if you are just doing a dedicated day on chest in the gym, then you want to do a dedicated day to back, working the opposite way, or put the two together and just work in a slightly different way. There's like really literally hundreds of ways to program exercises together. There's so many exercises to choose from, sometimes it can be a little bit mind-blowing, and actually simple basic movements, compounds and isolations, the actual ones that you pick actually usually comes down to which ones work best for you, and you can do safely, you've got access to the equipment, and you can do in a progressive fashion. So that might mean actually at some point you use an exercise to the point where you can't actually do too much more with that exercise, so therefore you choose a different exercise to start to build up again. Just on that though, sometimes we kind of get to a point where we think actually I can't do too much more with this exercise, and then start to do some other things with it, which I'm going to talk about now. So one thing I've talked about quite a lot in terms of exercise terminology is to do with the speed of the reps, particularly working out at home where we might have a bit more limited equipment. I've tried to, in a sense, try and keep it simple, particularly with the weights workout and with the lower body workout and with some of the body weight stuff, is to do things slower. As an exercise becomes easier, so let's just take the press up, use that quite often with the online workouts in the mornings. As you get better at press ups, rather than trying to do more, particularly in the time, it's actually to go slower. And by going slower, you are bringing more muscle fibers into play. Now, because we're going slower, what we're increasing is the time of the tension that the muscle is experiencing, which is also, tension is what muscles, that's what they know, that's what they experience. Whatever methodology of training tool you're using, be it being weights, machines, body weight, the muscles don't, in a sense, know that. Our brains know what we're doing, and we can go, actually right now we're doing a press up rather than a chest press. The muscles just feel tension. The nervous response is against tension. So however you create that tension and however you increase that tension, all the muscle experiences the tension. It's called time under tension, TUT. There's different ways of doing that in terms of slowing things down, doing things for longer. Done workouts where we use a hold and then a movement. That is just tools to create more tension into the same muscle group. I was looking back over some of the Friday workouts, just kind of like, I like to change Friday. Friday's the Friday challenge in MW Fitness Online. Likes to be a little bit different, change things around a bit, just kind of throw things in there. Like, actually, we've only done it once, where we did the hold and move, where we did a hold and then a movement, and that's just about increasing that time under tension. So whenever we can increase that, we don't need to increase the weight. And sometimes actually there's applications where we might decrease the weight to create more tension in a different sort of way. So for instance, I've put into different workouts kind of holds with bicep curls and then curling on one side for a few reps, and then round to the other side, curl on the other side. That's just about increasing the time under tension. Same with the rows. When I've got you to do a hold, you're holding it, you're stimulating the back muscle because it's in a hold, and then you're moving the other side, and then around to another hold, swapping over, that sort of thing. You know, doing that drop-in plank, where you start off with a top plank, you drop it in, and the extra tension goes into the triceps. You know, that's just another method of increasing tension, increasing stimulation into the muscles, and time under tension increases. Therefore, that stimulus is on the muscle that you're targeting with that method. And it doesn't work across every single exercise. I personally find it works pretty well with bodyweight leg movements, press up, plank type of movements in terms of working your body weight. And then in terms of training with weights, shoulders are another really good one to use with time under tension. And I've not used it for quite a long time myself, but there's a workout that I've got combining quite fairly light weights, because you do like a minute of lateral raises with literally 40 to 50% of the weight you would use to do a set of 12 or 15. And because you're doing it for a minute, just that consistency of keeping moving, the kind of lactic acid, the burn that builds up, because that extra tension is different, it's a different stimulus, a really good stimulus, compared to moving the larger, heavier weight for less reps. And you know, for me, I found it really effective when I've used it, and a great way of doing quite a short workout for particular muscle groups. You know, you can apply it across the board, 15 to 20 minutes of doing some time sets that are a little bit longer. You might only do 2 or 3 sets of the movement, 60 seconds on the shoulders, 30 to 60 seconds off, repeat that movement again, 3 or 4 movements, as I'm saying, per muscle group. You know, actually it's a great one to do at home with fairly light weights. Cool. Next term is RPE, relative perceived exertion. Now they teach you this on your courses to when you're doing personal training, and actually sometimes on programs. I don't tend to use it because I prefer to just kind of talk through it and explain, kind of put your best effort in on any given day. For kind of more in-depth programs in terms of sports performance, powerlifting, where you might be repeating the same movement more frequently across a week or whatever, they'll say kind of on a Monday, your maximum RPE, relative perceived exertion, of your heaviest set is only going to be 6. And then on Wednesday, you're going to go up to 9. On Friday, you're going to go somewhere in between, around about 7, as you do with different movements. And then once a month, once every training cycle, every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, there'll probably be we're going to go for it, maximum 10 out of 10 RPE. So yeah, I've used it just kind of, generally what I find is when I'm working directly with someone in a training session, I can kind of see what their RPE is. And actually, going on to the next term in a second, we want to get towards that 9, 10 out of 10, kind of for the last set of an exercise. When that's called going to failure, where you physically can't do any more without direct kind of intervention, someone spotting to help you be able to complete that rep. And you know, that's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of working to a maximum. And there's actually a training methodology beyond that, which is called forced reps, where you physically do need someone or 2 people sometimes to work with you to keep that weight moving. It's not something I use very much of, because it is like very, very stimulating or in other words, it's kind of on the edge of what you're physically capable of doing, and not something to do regularly at all. People, in a sense, professional people, where just their whole life is training, bodybuilders, people like that, where it's all about maximum muscle gain towards competition, towards competing. They potentially maybe use force reps more often, and then that's just a method they use, not necessarily applicable to that many people, but interesting to know about. Another kind of one that's kind of come in, and I do talk about this usually more often, is called reps in reserve. So when I'm programming things for people to do, and I'm not 100% sure of how many you might be able to do of press-ups or whatever it is, I'll say for the first couple of sets, as you work around in this particular workout, you do it to the point of having 1 or 2 what's called reps in reserve. As in, if you did push it to a maximum, you could, or closer to a maximum, you could do 1 or 2 more of the movement, but you're saving that. So you're staying at around probably RPE, around about 7 or 8. You're keeping it just 1 degree back, just that little bit where actually I could push this a little bit more. Just going to ease back now, and then because I keep doing that number of reps repeatedly, 3 or 4 sets, actually by the time you do the last set, you've gone closer to a failure. And it's just a methodology to kind of get that stimulus at the right kind of level and repeatability in a workout, because we do need some repeatability at times. There is certain methods of training, like I'm talking about the force reps and really pushing it to a maximum, where you can do literally 1 or 2 sets because you're working to absolute flat out maximum. I've trained like that before in the past. It is really hard, and the recovery afterwards, like literally directly afterwards, is slow. I've had times where I've done workouts like that with a guy that used to train me, and I then have to literally lie down and have a little sleep before I could drive home from where he used to train me. That's not ideal for most of us, because that's not really applicable to real life in terms of want to do a workout and then go to work or look after the kids or anything like that. It's very, very kind of niche and specific to a certain time usually in your life, or to people that are doing it because that is their life. But we need that repeatability, we need that stimulation on the muscle for the next term, which is MPS. MPS stands for muscle protein synthesis, and that's what training is doing, and that's what good nutrition is doing. It's creating an environment for muscle protein synthesis. So we want to train, cause a stimulus, the body then needs to change by having a good nutritional intake of protein, the different amino acids which I talked about before with different nutrition ones. Then muscle protein synthesis, get the words out, can then go on and occur, and our muscles get better and improve. And there's a calorie turnover to do that. Metabolism comes into it as a factor, and we're creating the right environment for that to happen. So then the next thing is more just a general talk about rest times. So the reason that we have rest times is to recover and have repeatability. So whether it's a straight set, superset, tri-set, there's going to be a point of having a rest. And partly because we're aiming to work pretty hard across all the sets, so we probably will need a little rest in between, but we don't want the rest times to be too long, because too long a rest down rates the potential for the stimulus for muscle protein synthesis. That's why usually for most people 30 to 60 seconds rest, maybe slightly longer, is about right. So in terms of training, it's usually enough time to get a drink. If you're recording down, noting down what you're doing, either type it into your phone, put it on the log sheet, whatever it is, writing it down, and then back into the next set. Which is why more at the gym, when I see people having a long conversation or sitting texting or whatever it is between sets, they're kind of missing out on the potential, kind of missing out on what they want to achieve by training, because they're being distracted. So that's why we try not to have the rest periods too long. There is applications for having really good rest periods if you are someone who is training at a maximal level with certain movements like squat, deadlift I was talking about before, you want to be resting for much longer in between to really prepare mentally and physically to kind of go for those really technical, heavy lifts. So there's different applications, but for most of us, a rest time of 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe a little bit more, particularly if you've maybe done a superset or a tricep or a giant set. Recover, go again. Recover, go again. That's cool. And then the last thing I just want to talk about is the difference between, people talk about cardio and also conditioning. Focus on cardio first. In a sense, there's two styles of cardio. There is what's called LISS, L-I-S-S, low impact steady state. That's things like going for a walk, things like walking on a treadmill. In a sense, not my style, but there's definitely applications for it. Definitely applications if you're recovering from an injury. It's definitely applications for being active, and that might be for your general health and fitness. That might be as a headspace to go for a walk. You might pop your music on, you might be walking the dog, all that sort of thing. That, low impact steady state cardio definitely got its place. And then we kind of go up to medium impact. So that's going to be working a bit faster. That might be the run, the jog, the cross trainer, steady rowing, that sort of thing. Those things are a little bit harder, but you're still going to do them for a long time. And then we go to the other end of the extreme where we have HIIT, high intensity interval training. So it's HIIT, which is more the kind of style we do in the mornings, and more the kind of style where you're going to move fast for a short period of time, maybe 30 seconds up to 50 seconds, that type of thing. Workouts are fairly short, going to be done within half an hour, much higher intensity. That could also look like sprint intervals. It could also look like sprint intervals on the rower. It could look like sprint intervals on a cross trainer. Anything that's kind of fast and then slow. Interval training is kind of the high intensity end of cardiovascular training. That then kind of transcends across into conditioning. Now, conditioning is kind of my favourite type with interval training, my favourite type of cardio, in inverted commas, as in gets the heart and lungs working, cardiovascular system working, because it's also, it's going to be more stimulating on the muscles you're using to do it, and therefore the ability to maintain that muscle, particularly when you're in a calorie deficit, is much, much higher. The body wants to keep what it is using. So if you are using your muscles in a higher intensity way, the body's going to prioritize keeping that, to make sure that if that intense stimulus comes along again, it's ready to go. The downsides of really high intensity conditioning and cardio is the recovery time, which is obviously then when nutrition comes into it, as well as ability to rest and recover and sleep and stretch, and all those sorts of things need to be taken into account. So in sense of really kind of, in a sense, looking at some of the kind of conditioning videos you might see on YouTube or whatever, where it's like really intense. They're doing the ball slams, they're doing, box jumps, they're doing ropes and things like that. Realistically, that once or twice a week, that's the type of thing they're doing. I mean, it might look like they've got the physique where it seems like they're doing that maybe all the time, but actually, there's a diminishing return from doing high intensity stuff all the time, which is why, in a sense, I kind of pace the morning workouts. So some of it's fast, some of it's steady. It's more a complete whole body thing on a regular basis. That's why I put the stretch workout in. That's why I put the kind of steadier lower body workout in. And it's why, I put the 7 workouts there to do, but you kind of pick and choose the ones that are going to work best for you, either on time on the days or the ones that you enjoy doing. And if you get in kind of 3 to 4 of the more intense body weight or lower body workouts a week, plus a stretch workout, you've covered everything in that sense. You've covered the cardiovascular, you've covered the high intensity, you've covered flexibility and mobility, or we've covered pretty much all the movement patterns that are possible to do, training at home and just training with body weight. If you haven't got equipment, you've got the whole lot done. And in a sense, we've probably covered all these terms that I've gone through tonight through just that, through the schedule of workouts that I keep. That's the idea anyway. So that's a whole bunch of terms around training. If there's any others that you hear and you have heard regularly and you kind of want to know what they mean, please drop me a comment, send me a message. Always happy to talk about this stuff, as you know. And yeah, I'm here to help and support in whatever way I can. So have a really good Wednesday evening. Back in the morning stretch workout at 8 a.m. I look forward to that because I really enjoy it, and it's something that I think I've really benefited probably in terms of training the most from this period, the last 2.5 to 3 months. So yeah, see you in the morning, 8 a.m. for the stretch workout. Have a great Wednesday evening.